Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here. We are super excited to talk to you today about the Teaching Skills That Matter project. So first, I want to introduce our team. So we have been working on the Teaching Skills That Matter project for about 9 months now. So I'm going to ask anybody on the team who's got access to a camera, if you want to just come on camera real quickly. So hello, good morning, everyone. So this is our Teaching Skills That Matter Texas team. We've got Amber Miller, wave Amber, with Austin Community College. Myself, I'm Beth Ponder with Train PD at TCall. Gareth Wingfield, who I don't think Gareth has a camera today, with Literacy Council of Tyler. Mario Ortiz with Brownsville ISD. Wave, Mario, yay. And Tiffany Lee with ESC 9. Good morning, Woo! Tiffany. You're getting cat calls from the crowd. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera, but we just wanted to say hello and have you meet our team. So this is what we want to accomplish in the time we have together. We're going to talk about the background and the purpose of the Teaching Skills That Matter project, and we're going to show you how to access all the resources. So I think that's a real important part of what we want to do today, is to give you access to all this great material. We're going to talk about what's in the Teaching Skills That Matter toolkit. We're going to look at some of the lesson plans and kind of break it down and show you what some of the components are. And then we're going to have the instructors that have been part of this project talk to you about what they've done in their classroom with this material and how they've adapted some of the lesson plans. And then we're going to talk to you about what's coming next with this project. So that's what we want to accomplish today. So I'm going to start us off with kind of the background information and show you how we do the resources. So the Teaching Skills That Matter project really came out of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act legislation of 2014. And most of you are familiar with WIOA, but there are a couple of things that were laid out in that legislation. One was that it required increased access to employment, education, training, and support services for individuals who face barriers to employment. And I think all of us are familiar with the increase on employment in the WIO legislation. But it also highlights basic academic skills, including critical thinking skills, digital literacy skills, and self-management skills. So thinking about those things in the legislation, the U.S. Department of Education Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, or OCTAE, which is who funds adult education across the nation, reached out and gave a contract to the American Institutes for Research to develop this Teaching Skills That Matter project to provide support for those things that were laid out in the legislation. So I want to talk a little bit about the components of this project. So one big component, the big resource component, is the toolkit. And we're gonna go look at the toolkit. We're going to talk about all the pieces there. And within the toolkit, there are descriptions of the skills, subject areas, and instructional approaches. There's templates for units and lesson plans. And then there are a series of already vetted lessons that integrate the skills that matter. But what kind of went along with that was this training component. And it was a model of coaching as well as rolling out to states all of this information. So they've had a pilot group and then 3 state cohorts. And Texas was part of one of the states that was part of cohort 2. And we did have an assigned coach. So as we went through this 9 months of training that we went through, we had someone that was assigned specifically to the state of Texas to help support us in integrating the components. So I want to just talk just a little bit about what we've done. So Texas was like early last summer, applied to be part of this cohort. And you had to have obviously signed off by the state director, but also a state PD person, and then 4 instructors that were dedicated to participating in the project. So that was myself and the 4 instructors that we just got introduced to. And so we had started with webinars back in August. We had 2 days of training in October, multiple webinars in between, 3 days in October, and then 2 more days of training in March. So we just finished our last day of training on March 19th. And so now we're bringing what we've learned, at least an introduction of what we learned, to you. So this is a super important slide because this is the core of what this project is about. And they call it 953. So 9 central skills that matter, 5 topic areas, and 3 instructional approaches. So the 9 central skills, this is kind of the heart of this whole project. These are the skills that adults need to be successful: adaptability and willingness to learn, communication, critical thinking, interpersonal skills, navigating systems, problem solving, processing and analyzing information, respecting differences and diversity, and self-awareness. And any of you that have been through the employability skills framework training, some of these will look very familiar because there's a lot of overlap there. And then the 5 topic areas that they decided to concentrate on for this particular project, in part because of what was laid out in that piece about the WIOA legislation that I just read to you. So the 5 topic areas that they decided to concentrate on were civics education, digital literacy, financial literacy, health literacy, and workforce preparation. And then as they're designing all this, they decided we want to use instructional approaches that we know are successful moving students forward. And so the 3 research evidence-based instructional approaches that they used were project-based learning, problem-based learning, and integrated and contextualized instruction. So now we want to talk a little bit about where you can find all these resources. So all of the materials for the Teaching Skills That Matter project are housed on the LINCS website. And we'll go there in a few minutes and I'll show you exactly how to find the materials because there's a lot there in LINCS. And if you're not familiar with it, I'll take you to the main site and then show you how to get to these materials, but there's a whole lot of other wonderful stuff there too. But it's hidden under federal initiatives. I'll take you to the links.ed.gov main site in a few minutes and just show you how to get to the materials. So when we get there, some of the things that we'll see under those 5 topic areas that I just mentioned, there are 5 lesson plans that are available to you. So at this point, you've got a total of 25 lesson plans that are already ready to go. They're examples of the 3 instructional approaches, and they also have instructional videos where you actually have an instructor in an adult ed classroom that's modeling each of the 3 instructional approaches. And I'll show you how to find those. So I just want to kind of go over what all the pieces of the toolkit are. And so first off, there are 5 sections that cover those 5 content areas that we just talked about. And that's where you'll have the lesson plans, but there are also in some cases, there's a case study or some kind of template that you would use for an activity. So there are 5 sections covering each of those content areas. And then there's a 6th section that talks about the instructional approaches that we just talked about, a section with templates and tools, and then instructional resource and reference list. So those are kind of all the pieces. There's a lot of stuff. Makes a big, 2.5, 3-inch binder. So we're going to go out and we're going to take a look. So this is links.ed.gov. This is a project. Again, this is one that's supported by Octave, which is our funder at the federal level. And there's a lot of great stuff here. I won't take a bunch of time going through all of it, but there are free online courses here. There's online communities of practice. There's vetted resources. But what we want to do is we want to go here at the top. You see community, courses, resource collection, and state resources. We want to go to state resources. And this is a section that Octay has put together specifically for adult education programs and the states that support them. And over here on the left nav bar, we're going to go to federal initiatives. And on that page, you're going to see that these are all projects that Octay has funded to support states. There's one on content standards, one on integrating technology, career pathways, and there's a section that's really specific to improving instruction. And it's called Disseminating Evidence-Based Methods and Techniques. And that's where you're going to find the skills that matter. There also is a lot of other resources there, the STAR Reading Program and the Adult Numeracy Initiative, which hopefully we'll have more, they're updating that. Hopefully we'll have more on that soon. So the very bottom of the list is the teaching skills that matter in adult education. So this is the page, but this is where you're going to find all of this wonderful stuff. So here again is our 953, our 9 skills, 5 topic areas, 3 approaches. And as we scroll down the page, here are those sections that we kind of just went over. Here's your civics, digital literacy, financial literacy, health literacy, workforce prep, and then your other tools. Here under overview, I'm going to click on overview and kind of show you that. This is where you'll find the instructional videos. So if you're interested in learning more about those instructional approaches, there's some kind of nuanced differences between problem-based and project-based. So this will be an instructor that's actually modeling those. The videos are like between 7 and 8 minutes, somewhere in there, but they're really good to show you modeling. And so I'm just going to pop over to civics to just kind of give you an idea of what you'll see when you go into the individual topic areas. There's an issue brief, there's a case study, and then there's our actual lesson plans. And I'm going to just click on this first lesson plan so you just can get a view of what that looks like. And we're going to go into a little more depth about breaking down what all is covered in the lesson plan in just a moment. And we're actually going to talk a little bit about this particular lesson because it's one of the ones that one of our Texas teachers used in his classroom. All right, so at this point, I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to Gareth, and he's going to kind of break down the kind of the components of the lesson plan, and then we're going to get a chance to hear from our teachers about what they did in their classrooms and how they kind of adapted some of these lessons. So Gareth, you want to take it away?
Thank you. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to talk about when I first got into learning the skills that matter lesson plans, one of the concerns that I had was that, this is going to be another thing that we have to do in addition to the lesson plans that we're already doing. And one of the things that kind of allayed my fears is that a lot of what they have here in these lesson plans already conforms to things that we already do as teachers in Texas. They have actually a fairly similar structure to what we would expect. So we have a kind of just a breakdown in the top part of what we're expecting to happen, kind of a light overview, like they say here, the instructional objectives, and then our learning targets. The lesson plans that come with the toolkit are aligned with more of the standards that are used throughout the rest of the country. We're looking at lining them up with the Texas content standards, but a lot of them are fairly straightforward. You can see just by reading the text what they're asking you to do, be able to participate in diverse media, be able to construct meaning. These are things that are analogous to our lesson plans. So again, a breakdown, a comparison of what we see here. You got in an introduction, you've got modeling, and then guided practice, application, extended practice, and then an opportunity for student reflection. And that student reflection is usually that moment when we're going to get the exit ticket. A lot of these lessons come with an exit ticket to see how well the students have connected with the material and how well they understand it. One of the things I like is that they emphasize that different skills that come from the 9 central skills are listed in the lesson plan, so you know what each area is focusing on. The lesson plan is going to introduce by saying what skills are used throughout the whole lesson, but then throughout each component, it then identifies, what's really the focus on at this stage of things, so that you have a little bit more opportunity to zero in on what you're being asked to do, what you're asking your students to do. And the lesson that I wanted to focus on was the First Amendment rights lesson. In particular, I wanted to focus on this one because it has, like I said, a lot of similarities to lessons that we already use. So you've got, the application and extended process. You've got over here on the left is the lesson plan that appears from the toolkit. And over on the right is a lesson plan that I've used in the past that I revisited recently. So it was fresh in my mind. And you can see that there's a fair similarity in the structure. So we're not relearning the wheel. We're not redesigning the wheel. We're just making some small modifications to it. So the First Amendment lesson, just kind of a couple of snapshots of what's in the toolkit. There on the left, we have the instructional objectives, we have the content standards that are met, and then top center is that summary of the essential skills that are used in this lesson. So we see that it teaches communication, it teaches critical thinking, it teaches interpersonal skills, and some problem solving, processing, and respecting differences and diversity, as well as self-awareness. When you are teaching these with your students, I find that it's easier to focus, pick the ones that you want to really emphasize as part of your delivery of the topic. One of the things I wanted to emphasize was respecting differences and diversity, for example. So when we're looking at the images of protests, we tried to be very respectful, and understanding of why people are engaged in these protests. What are these protests for? What forms do protests take? We had some light reading, and the proof of learning, as indicated there in the middle, is a team product. So we want the students to be able to produce something that demonstrates their understanding of the topic. So this was what I did to adapt it. This was originally an ESL lesson. It was a high intermediate ESL lesson, but it's an ESL lesson. And my students are not ESL students. My students are HSE students. But I found that it actually adapted to an adult secondary class fairly easily by just adding a few things that are just slightly higher, but are of the same content. So we focused on certain skills. We focused on that respecting differences and diversity, processing and analyzing information, and communication. We wanted everybody to be able to communicate what they understood and what the amendments was trying to get across to people. So we looked at the primary source. We went to the Constitution. We looked at the First Amendment, and we took some time to just interpret the original words. And then we looked at the materials that came with the toolkit, which included matching definitions with the original text. We then looked at some expert opinions. I found some constitutional scholars on Khan Academy that had rendered their opinions on the First Amendment and put them into a nice instructional video, which I was able to then put on Edpuzzle, a lovely website if you haven't used it, that allowed me to embed questions so that we could pause and have regular conversations about what the experts were trying to get across, and have those opportunities for discussion so that we would know how to extend this and apply it to the rest of our lives. So we looked at extension activities. We looked at how does this actually execute in the real world? What are the exceptions? When does your right to free speech or your right to free exercise stop? Once we had a fairly firm grasp of that, we turned to the reading activities that come with the toolkit. I put those on GoFormative because then I was able to just take things out of the toolkit, the PDFs right out of the toolkit, and put them onto the internet and make them instantly accessible to the students, whether they were on phones or they were on computers at home or in a classroom with me. Once they were able to interact with it and we had finished the readings and activities, we then had a research project. I asked them to go online and find examples of what they felt were people exercising their First Amendment privileges. What is they had to find an example of somebody exercising free speech, somebody exercising right of assembly, people exercising freedom of religion. And then once they compiled those into a slideshow, they would then explain why they picked the items that they picked. So I found that, this was a fairly straightforward, lesson to scale up to meet the needs of my students. And all the material that was in the toolkit was useful, even though it was not designed with my class in mind.
All right. Thank you, Gareth. Does any participant have a question specifically for Gareth about the lesson or how he implemented it in his classroom? You got a well done in the chat there, Gareth.
Thank you, Carrie.
They like your tech integration.
Thank you, Ashley.
And I think you'll see that most of our instructors did do some. Everybody in the state really has done such a great job of integrating technology and technology tools over this last year.
Yes, the needs of our students, we have to be able to meet them in a classroom, or we have to be able to meet them in their homes through Zoom. So, finding those opportunities and those abilities when we can get the technology to reach them, and so that the instruction can follow.
Thank you. Great, Gareth. So next up, we have Amber Miller with Austin Community College. Amber, you want to come on?
Hi. So my name's Amber and I teach ESL at ACC. And the lesson I did was a digital literacy lesson about telling folk stories. So what I liked about this lesson is a lot of the lessons already have a lot of worksheets and a lot of materials. This one did not, but it did. But what I liked about it is it's immediately accessible for ESL students, and the idea of folk stories is, and also what I liked about it is that it hits all 9 skills. So all of them are checked off the box there. So what I did is I laid this out like a timeline, because there's also not given times. All of our classes are different lengths, I know, and we make different amount of times each week. So how much time it takes you is up to you. Mine I did in 3 days. So I laid it out like a timeline. Now I know the pictures are a little small, but at the very end I put a link to all my materials at the end. So the first day was more about introduction to the topic. So we did a warm up with conversation questions. These were taken directly from the toolkit. And then I wanted to give them an example. So I used this kid's Paul Bunyan book that I had, and we read that together and did some comprehension questions. And then I showed them a model of an end result that I was hoping them to have. So with digital literacy, I find my students have a very low level of digital literacy skills. So I find that really chunking it out and giving them a model helps them understand where we're going first. So I gave them a model presentation, and then they formed groups, they assigned roles, and decided which folk story as a group to use. And so they talked about ones that they knew about and decided which one to use. And so that was all the day one. And then day 2, so day 2 is really just planning and creating their presentations. So again, this is a project-based one. So we really wanted that in project as a result. So I found for my ESL students that giving them a template really helped. The first lesson I taught was about food, and it was also a project-based one. And in that lesson, we had learned a little bit about Google Docs. So they were already familiar with it. So the first thing I did was give them a Google Doc template that they just had to fill in as a group. And then the new thing was making a presentation. So for this, I gave them a Google Slide template, and they could just carry the information over from their Google Doc. So we learned how to copy and paste and things like that and put in pictures into the presentation. And then for some of the students, if they were ready, I recorded them in class. I just brought them out and recorded them by themselves in the main room with a recording feature. but most of the students just ended up recording at home. And then I put it all together for them. And then on day 3, we watched all the videos, all the presentations, and then did the feedback. And the feedback for all these lessons is always about, well, if they were successful in completing the project, but also about the skills that matter. Which of the 9 skills did they feel like they use the most? And we're communicating back, giving feedback back about those skills. So like it says there, you can find examples in my templates there at that link. And my email's there too if you need me. So if you want to ask me any questions after. And I think that's all.
Well, thank you, Amber, and thank you for sharing, since Amber is graciously sharing her templates.
Yeah, and so, yeah, like I said, this one didn't have a lot of supporting documents. So they're there for you, and especially if you just want to try a lesson now, then it's all laid out, except for the book, except for the because that's, copyright issues. But I did put links inside that link about places that you can go and find other folk tales to share with your students. Like Voices of America has radio recordings of them, which would be better for HSE or higher level ESL students. So those are all there.
Thank you, Amber. And the other thing I'll just take a pause and note for all our participants today, as part of kind of their culminating project for this, each of the teachers recorded a video that was then showcased in our last training day. So it was not just Texas, but all of the other states that participated in cohort 2 created a video about what they did and how they implemented into their classroom. And we kind of it was kind of fun to try and figure out how to do this virtually, because of course this training initially would have been face-to-face, but we ended up having to do the entire thing virtually. So they kind of did a showcase of how people implemented in their classrooms. And the implementation that they did over the course of the 9 months was supported fully by our assigned instructional coach. And her name was Stephanie, and she was fabulous. And if you actually go and watch the videos on the Links website that talk about the instructional approaches in the contextualized instruction one, that was our coach, Stephanie. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Mario. Mario, you want to unmute and take it away?
Yes, and thank you, Beth. Hi, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mario Ortiz, and I work at Brownsville ISD Adult Continuing Education. I teach Microsoft Office at our program, and basically I help students get prepared to get certified in 5 of the applications from Microsoft Office. That's basically what I do. Okay, so one of the lessons that I implemented was from financial literacy. So here is a lesson that I took from the toolkit with my Microsoft Office specialist class, or my MOS class. The title of that lesson was Household Cash Flow, or I guess we can call it budget or budgeting. And this is basically a lesson on how to manage our money. This lesson from the toolkit does a great job presenting and providing students the opportunity to work on 7 of the 9 skills that we have mentioned before in this presentation. Those central skills, you can see them right there in front of the screen. Those are communication, critical thinking, processing and analyzing information, adaptability and willing to learn, navigating the system, problem solving, and self-awareness. Now, these central skills teach students the following in this lesson, in this financial literacy lesson. Communication. It provides students the opportunity to talk about financial issues that they usually come across every day, like paying the mortgage, paying the rent, credit card, a car, insurance. In other words, paying the bills. The next central skill that you see here, critical thinking. Here, students learn about potential consequences and how actions can have a financial impact in their lives. The next one, processing and analyzing information. In this one, students are presented with a case study that provides information that they have to process, analyze, and based on that information, they have to make a decision. Adaptability and willing to learn. Here, students share how they come across similar types of financial decisions throughout their lives and how they have to adjust due to circumstances like starting a new job, retirement, change in number of household members. In other words, life happens to them and they have to adjust and adapt to their budget. Next, we have navigating systems. Here, students become aware that companies require the ability to complete a process or follow established protocols. In our case, students had to learn how to navigate in Excel because we were using Excel and we were adapting, okay, this lesson from the toolkit to our lessons, okay? So you get to adapt, okay, the lessons from the toolkit to what you're teaching in class. Very detailed lessons, by the way. Next, we have problem solving. In this one, students are presented with real life problem where they require to apply problem solving. So they get a scenario, they have so much money, but they have so many expenses. They have to manage that. They have to work with the budget. Then there's an increase, okay? A 10, maybe 25% increase on the expenses, and they have to adjust. They are presented with a problem and they have to work, okay, and come with a solution to that problem. And then we have self-awareness. By the end of the lesson, students are aware that financial planning involves being aware of personal values, aims, and circumstances. Students also reflect on how reality and personal habits affect how they manage their money. Now you see some images on the left, 3 images, and on the right, 3 other images. These are images from the actual lesson that I presented when I did this lesson, okay? If you notice the first image on the right, it says financial literacy, and it has a little quote there. Money doesn't fall from the sky, okay? And so I started this with the students. I asked them about what they thought about this quote. And so we started a conversation with this. It was very engaging. And then we moved down, okay? If you notice, there's another image there. This one is from vocabulary. So we cover vocabulary that we were going to be seeing in this lesson. Vocabulary such as budget, cash flow, cash inflow, cash outflow, remain, finances, and other vocabulary. Below that, you see another image, wants and needs. And here, students were presented with the opportunity to talk about wants and needs, their definition. Okay, we wanted to hear what was their definition of wants and needs. And once again, we started that conversation and they shared all that information, okay, with the rest of the class. Very engaging there. From here, okay, we move to, and you see an image on the left that says, and I think you can barely see the title, let's talk about monthly expenses. So we have already talked about wants and needs. And so here, I asked students to help me organize these pictures that you can see into these 2 columns, wants and needs. This activity, it was very engaging. The students provided their knowledge on, well, let me see, Ms. Ortiz, I think this falls under the wants, or I think this falls under the needs. It created a debate, okay? Very engaging. And so we have fun. We have fun doing this lesson and organizing those pictures there. We talk about pets, we talk about house, we talk about the cell phone, the car, you name it, okay? And then below that image, you see another image about a spreadsheet. So the toolkit provides handouts, okay? It's an excellent resource there to give any of these lessons or implement any of these lessons in your class. But since we were practicing with Excel in my class, students presented their work via online and utilizing spreadsheets, okay? Now, this is where they apply what they had already learned in class, okay? And they enter information, They work with formulas, they edit information, apply format, and then they present it to the class, okay? How they have manipulated or play with the numbers, okay? When it came to budgeting, okay? And it was fun, okay? It took a week to do this lesson, okay? By presenting this to the students, giving them the opportunity to work on Excel, sharing our ideas, and then giving them time, okay, to prepare and then to present this to the class. And then the last image that you see there, Kahoot. Some of you might be familiar with this program. If you're not, I encourage you to use it in class. It's very engaging. You get to review what you cover in class. The students view this as a game, but in reality, they're going over the concepts and ideas that you cover with them, okay? I just want to recognize all the teachers and students that participated in this and other lessons that I presented from the toolkit in our program. These are just some pictures of some of the students and the teachers, Ms. Garcia, Ms. Moreno, Ms. Guerrero, Ms. Rios, and Mr. Sauceda. Thank you. Thank you for letting me implement some of these wonderful lessons from the toolkit. And I think that's it from me, Beth.
All right. Thank you, Mario. And we've got just a few comments. They like seeing the dog there in the middle of wants and needs. And I think for a lot of us, that's a need. Comment about we all have money issues, and this is very good life skill problems that occur to all of us. Mario is an awesome presenter. He paces his presentations excellent. So great job. So thank you, Mario. You'll notice, again, most of us are using a lot of new online resources in the last year, but within the toolkit, there is built-in overlap between those 5 content areas that we talked about there at the beginning. So even though this particular lesson was a financial literacy lesson, there's actually built-in digital literacy skills. So as you go through the toolkit, you're going to see some overlap between the content areas. Okay, thank you again. Great job, Mario. Okay, next up, we have Miss Tiffany Lee from ESE 9. Tiffany?
Thank you. Hello, my name is Tiffany Lee. I'm the distance learning lead instructor here at Region 9 in Wichita Falls, Texas. My lesson was the digital literacy of workplace safety, and it is for the class that I presented in. It was the ESL levels 3 through 6. I currently work in the administration side in the office, more in the office, but when I got the opportunity to be a part of this project, and I just love having the opportunity to get back in the classroom. And it was the ESL levels 3 through 6. Out of the 9 central skills, in this lesson, I focused in on the 5 central skills, and just to remember that these are the transferable skills that can help us be effective in work and life. And the first central skill, it was that they had to focus on, and actually is to be adaptability and willingness to learn and to navigate the systems. The pandemic forced us to learn new digital skills, and I had to adapt the lesson for a remote environment, but keep it engaging for a remote classroom. The students navigated well in the Zoom platform, and then they learned this new tool called Nearpod. And Nearpod, if you don't know what Nearpod is a go-to tool for interactive presentations and assessments for the classroom. In the class that I took care of, they were very quiet. So my goal was to make sure they be engaged in the classroom and to be interactive. So Nearpod helped out with that. So let me show you how we did that. So in this Nearpod activity, we used our communication central skill for this one. The question for them is that they had to find one problem and then find the solution to the program and be prepared to talk about their findings. So actually it's the hazard. If you look at the picture that says, tell me about this picture. So we had the the picture of a workplace, and they had to describe a potential unsafe behavior at work. So I used the Nearpod activity, the PDF viewer, and a digital resource from the North Southern Wales Government Safe Work Interactive Safety Hazard Diagrams. I first placed the picture without the answers on the slide, and then I asked them to tell me about this picture. And we want our students in the ESL classroom to actually to speak and to oral speaking to increase those speaking skills. And one thing that you can do is you can put a picture up and then just have them start talking about it. So in this activity, I had them to tell me about the picture of how many hazards that they could find and then find the solution. After they communicated with me on their findings, I went to the next slide, and where I had the actual PDF interactive viewer. So the students were able to click on the PDF, if you can see that icon, and then go to the website, and then they're able to hover over the problems they saw in the workplace. And the website had construction, they had warehouse, hospital, office, and farming. And so we just did a few, and then we went over how to solve those as solutions. So in this activity for the Nearpod, I used the open-ended question for the central skill of critical thinking. And the students had to explain what are some ways you can be safe at work. And they were given a text box. If you can see at the bottom right-hand corner on their screen, they were given a text box, and they had to enter their answer of some ways that they can be safe at work. And then on the teacher side, you could see on the left bottom their response. So they just start typing their answer, and then the teacher could see their responses. And some of their responses is like wearing equipment or using the protective gloves. And then the last activity was of the central skills was problem solving. So the TSTM lesson has the students on their own individual Google Doc, placing pictures on a document in their meetings. So I adapted this lesson for the Nearpod activity. This activity is called a collaborative board, and it's similar to Padlet, but it's in the Nearpod lesson, so there's no going back on a site to click on it. So what they do is their task was they have to look for 3 safety signs, a yellow one, a red one, a green one, and a blue one. And they had to post those safety signs, and they have to type what they mean. And they could see everybody's answers, as you could see, and then they have to type what they mean. And then we discussed their meaning behind each of them and each of the workplace safety signs. But if you could see, it's just a collaborative board, so it's everybody's. And then the one thing about Nearpod, they do have the session reports. So you could see how the students are engaged in the open-ended. There was an activity with the matching pairs. They had to match the meaning along with the workplace safety sign and then the collaborative board. But you can see that each person participated and they were active in the whole lesson. So are there any questions?
Thank you, Tiffany. What great use of well, for all of you, great use of the technology tools. So any questions? We got some nice comments coming in. Okay, so Ashley asked, so were these lessons pre-made or did you make them?
The TSTM lessons are pre-made, and what I did is, or I guess what majority of us did is what we adapted it to our needs. They're pre-made for the in-person classes, and my class was remote. So I had to figure out how to use that lesson for the remote atmosphere. So that's why I used Nearpod in order to make sure the students were interactive for the long haul, and then also include all of those activities that are in there.
Okay, so we're going to kind of get close to wrap up. So, hang on, Tiffany. Michelle's asking, what is Nearpod? Can you give us just a quick rundown?
Sure. It's a go-to tool for interactive presentations and assessments for the classroom. So what it is that the teacher, it's like an interactive presentation. So the teacher will share a link into the classroom. Yes, you can use Nearpod for the GED side too, but you can do open-ended questions. You can do matching pairs. There is a drawing tool that you can do. I think they added a whiteboard on the teacher side. There's that collaborative board. And yes, thank you, Gareth. It is very amazing. So it just keeps the students interactive, and you can use it for the remote side, but also the in-person side too.
Thank you, Tiffany. So I mentioned that as part of kind of our wrap up last day of training, we did the video showcase, and Krista put the links to each of our Texas instructors' videos that they did. So on top of doing a great job of integrating these lessons into their classes, they also did a great job of making videos. There's some real talent out there in creating video. So if you have an opportunity and want to hear a little bit more about what they did and how they did it, you're welcome to go and check on those videos. So we have about 4 minutes, 3 minutes now. So let's take just one of those minutes and kind of come back around to that 953. So I put some questions here. So remember, we had the 9 central skills, the 5 content areas, and the 3 instructional approaches. So just kind of thinking about what we've shared with you today. So is there a central skill that stands out that you would be interested in working with your students on? Or is one of those topic areas that's of particular interest to you? And then is there an instructional approach that you'd like to know more about? Claire says interpersonal skills, digital literacy, integrated and contextualized learning. Great. Thank you, Claire. Got a digital literacy. Want to try them all. Digital literacy, workforce prep. And those workforce prep activities are something that's required now under WIOA. So that might be super helpful to folks. Health literacy, anything ASE, HSE, more digital literacy, safety in home and work, contextualized. And the one that always had stuck out to me when I first started doing the employability skills framework training a number of years ago is the navigating systems. When you really have to stop and think about how important that is to being successful. That's great. Thank you. Thank you guys for sharing. So the last thing I want to talk about in just the few minutes that we have left is kind of what's next, right? So the 5 of us participated in this training. What are we going to do with what we learned? So the first step for us was to share the resources with as many folks as we could. So that's why we're having this session today, is to share this out with you. But then we're not stopping there. The 5 of us over the course of the summer are going to be working on taking the 5 days of training that we attended and narrowing it down to, I think what we're trying to get to is 1 6-hour face-to-face training with maybe some wraparound webinars. There's a lot of content. We kind of have to narrow it down. I think one of the things that our initial thought, and certainly we'll take any input from others, is to concentrate on the instructional approaches and then use the skills and the lesson plans to kind of undergird that. As Gareth mentioned, we're also aligning the teaching skills that matter lessons to the Texas content standards. And so what we hope to have is kind of a crosswalk that's got the lesson, the National College and Career Readiness Standards, which is what the toolkit aligns to, and then the Texas standards. So you can really quickly go and say, oh, that's what I need. We plan on piloting the training in January. I believe we're going to try and do it at Austin Community College. And then we'll roll out a training of trainers in spring. So next spring, we'll get our trainers up to speed, and then we'll have folks that are ready to go out into your programs and train on this material. thank you to our amazing Texas teachers that just did a superb job working with us on this project. And thank you, and I hope you have a great day.